What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about A Quiet Place Day 1, which it's like a spin-off, but it still feels in-universe as we follow Lupita Nyong'o as she tries to escape the nightmarish liquors while having New York City as the background. As always, Lupita Nyong'o can do no wrong. She's so good in all her performances, and thankfully this isn't an exception. And to that extent, I was so happy in the first half when they kind of teased that this movie was going to be just her alone, and I was all for it. She was able to exhibit so many emotions, and again, with little dialogue, she was able to deliver every emotion without falter. Adding in the element of her being a terminally ill cancer patient, making her this bitter, callous person that starts off cold and almost estranged, but then having this experience to show her the value of selflessness, and even changing her general outlook on things was a really impressive theme. That's what you call a character arc. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of A Quiet Place Part 2. I think it deviates far too much from the original concept that was established in the first film, along with the bigger, more obvious issues with the film, which was poor character decisions and an emphasis on action. Following familiar footsteps of IPs such as Terminator and Alien, character writing in a series like this where the cast is consistently small and each decision creates ripples for the rest of the cast made me so sad when in the sequel the characters became dumb and put themselves in more peril just for added dramatic effect. However, here I feel like they took a brand new approach to the concept and for the most part achieved a much better outcome than the sequel. So I would give them a gold sticker on that front. Check out my video on the original if you want to know my thoughts on it as I reviewed it. I'll link it below. One of the things that I really loved but was also left puzzled by was Alex Wolff's character, the nurse. His character was actually very important for Sam, not just because she actually knew him, but narratively he made so much more sense to be the one to stay in the story along with Sam. He was cut out way too early, and while I do genuinely feel his departure from the film hit the emotional beat they were looking for, as he not only saved everyone but also showed Sam the humanity that was in his heart that she kinda questioned earlier. She claimed that he wasn't her friend and was just with her because it was his job, but that moment really affected her and definitely changed her outlook on people as she became more caring towards others later in the film. To be candid, my problem with this is that I connected way more with Ruben than with Eric. Still, there's plenty to love of this film. The marionette show was beautiful, and when you're not expecting it, it hits that much harder. It's just breathtaking, and the editing along with the music was so gorgeous that even Sam broke down in tears. It goes without saying that the creatures are as dangerous and as savage as ever. And I like that they didn't overstay their welcome despite the constant threat of them, very much like the original. I really love the fact that there's a very significant difference between the creatures we see here as opposed to the ones we see in the previous films. Here, they're just not as evolved. Like, as the audience, you're conditioned to expect these things to know how to swim if you've seen the second movie. I was expecting a jump scare multiple times of them just jumping out of the water, but you have to remember this isn't the same form of them that we'd already been used to. They're just simply not as evolved here, and that includes capturing sound as well. Like, there's moments where I feel like the other versions of these creatures would have captured or heard those noises that were being made, but I appreciate that Sonarski actually differentiates them. Another really neat idea that they barely scratched the surface of, and I wish they would have gone more in that direction, but I'm glad they showed it anyway, was the loss of other senses outside of sound. There's this bit early on where Sam can't see or hear, and it's terrifying seeing her go through it, and I mean obviously the sound is cut out to put us in her position, but as an audience knowing what these things are and not being able to see them is horrific. I wish they played more with that idea. Losing other senses in this world would make it near impossible to survive. Usually I'm not a big fan of horror movies that are rated PG-13, but this franchise excels at knowing how to just not need it. And yet I like that the movie wasn't afraid to go dark, like when Henry killed the other civilian just to stop him from making other noise. I'd imagine in a situation as dire as this one, fear and anger would make people go feral and almost cannibalize each other. I like that he didn't hold back, and for the sake of the others, he got rid of the guy that was making noise. Innocence and fairness are not factors here, only thinking about survival. I do appreciate that the movie doesn't waste time on explaining pre-established rules, and it still feels logical in this world to quickly learn our set rules of survival. Aligned with that, using other ideas of new forms of camouflage like thunder and rain. And in general, the setting is New York City, and I really liked that they use the surroundings constantly to either create a scene of tension or to help the characters clear a hurdle. The environment was actually a factor in the story, and I really appreciated that not going to waste. Even in the initial incident, it kind of felt like they were able to capture a similar feeling of 9/11 with the wall of fog and anonymity of the events occurring. Ultimately, in a survivor horror movie, it feels like the main goal is to simply keep the tension high and keep the audience engaged to where you want them to root for the characters to survive. Luckily, I feel like they succeeded in that respect as the characters moved from place to place as they cleared the challenges presented to them. I still had some issues with some of the setups for the scares, as convenience is still very much an element in the story. It's done tastefully enough where you don't feel like it pulls you out of it. The cat was outrageous. Like, to have a service pet that actually makes no noise is kind of insane. Personally, I'm not a fan of how the cat is kind of the deus ex machina that propels the story forward when it needs to. It's like the writers had moments where they didn't know how to get the characters to certain locations, so they said, let's just follow the cat. And while minor, the pacing in the middle was a bit too slow, to the point that they added in a cheap dream jump scare that was very gratuitous. But I guess I understand, they probably knew that they had grinded to a stop for far too long, so they needed something to jolt the audience again. And luckily that was the only abrupt jump scare, so this is just a nitpick. I'd say my biggest complaint about the creatures themselves is the inconsistency of their speed. Like, there's moments where they're so fast you can't see them, and then there's other moments where you can quite literally swim away faster than they can crawl. However, it's rant time for a bit because I was left frustrated with a certain aspect of the film, and that's that Alex Wolff's performance was far more compelling than Joseph Quinn's character Eric. Speaking of which, Eric really dragged the film down for me. He wasn't charming, smart, or funny. Except the kick in the door bit, it was so unexpected and honestly felt in line with his character, while also adding in a great moment of levity. Just in general, he felt lame, meek, and I never felt sympathetic for him. And even how he's introduced was lame because he kinda just showed up literally out of the water. But really, just a few moments with this character made it very clear that Eric was solely written to help Sam learn to not be a mean person. And while that's not inherently a bad thing for a character to help others grow, they should exist for more than just that. Honestly, the worst part is that towards the beginning of the third act, we follow Eric for a while as the lead, and boy is that just the worst part. He follows the cat for some shenanigans and leads him into unnecessary danger, and what's more frustrating is that the movie just established that the cat will follow him around, so why follow it to danger if you already know he likes you and will follow you? All for nothing, because nothing comes out of that scene outside of some tacked on lore. In fact, he doesn't even mention to Sam what he saw, because not like that information is relevant or anything like that. Honestly, by this point I was expecting like a queen creature, but I wasn't even satisfied in that way, so the entire bit just felt pointless. Joseph Quinn, while fantastic in the Stranger Things series, at least for me, he wasn't able to emulate that charisma here he so effortlessly had in Stranger Things. Side note, you can definitely tell Platinum Dunes had their input on some of the screenplay for the more actiony scenes, but much to my happiness and joy, there wasn't much of it. Like, despite the deceitful ads and trailers, the story is still extremely grounded, which I loved. This felt very much like the Lupita Nyong'o show, and I was elated because of it. The drama horror blend is still here like the previous two films, and it's not reinventing the wheel here by any means, but it's not really trying to. I will say, while these characters aren't connected by any means to the other characters in the other movies, it does feel very much in universe. It doesn't feel forced, and if anything, it feels like these characters, had the circumstances allowed, could have eventually made contact with the other characters. I like that in a way, it's delving more into this world, since in the first film, it kind of feels bare as that was kind of its purpose, and at the same time, it had a nice tidy conclusion, almost cathartic. I'm glad the movie isn't derivative of a whole bunch of other movies. I feel like nowadays, almost all movies have to have some reference or pay homage to some other movie, and outside of the alien shot that Alex Wolff's character has, this movie felt very true to itself. I was just left wondering why recreate that shot if we already know Alien Romulus is coming out this year, and we know for a fact it's gonna have that in there. But other than that, I enjoyed the movie, and it delivered a solid entry into the series. Again, I'll link below my review of 2018's A Quiet Place, but that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe. My name's Anthony, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.